Good morning, all of you. This is time we discuss T.S.Eliot. Originally, he is named Thomas Stearns Eliot. He was born in America and he migrated to England in 1927. Interestingly, he was born in the year Matthew Arnold died. It was in 1888. Matthew Arnold died. The great poet critic Arnold died, and it was in the same year T.S.Eliot was born. Eliot studied in the American universities. For example, he had his education at Harvard. And there he came under many abiding influences. He studied the suggestive poetry of Baudelaire, a great French writer. And he also came into understanding Dante. He came into contact with Dante and his literary works. And he also came into contact with the Indian philosophy and Indian spiritualism and mythology that convinced him greatly at a later stage. And he studied Indian philosophy under J.H. Woods. And J.H. Woods was a professor of the university. And he had also written a book on Indian mythology, The Yoga Systems of Patanjali. Based on Indian spiritualism and mythology, J.H. Woods, the professor of T.S.Eliot, had even written a book, The Yoga Systems of Patanjali. And from Harvard University, he proceeded to Paris and studied at the Sorbonne University there. And in 1914, he reached England. He was then 26 years old and came into contact with Ezra Pound. Pound and Eliot became great friends. Pound was the one poet who introduced Imagism. He was also born in America and he came to England and introduced Imagism. Eliot became a close friend of Ezra Pound. And when Eliot started writing poems, it was Ezra Pound who promoted Eliot. The poem of Eliot, entitled The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, was edited and published by Ezra Pound in his magazine The Egoist. On reaching England, Eliot started writing modernist poetry. And he came out with his poem, A Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Interestingly, it was one of the earliest of modernist poems. And he also came out with other poem, Portrait of a Lady. He came out with the poem, Portrait of a Lady. That also took place in 1917. And after that, he came out with his poem, Girondine. It was produced in 1920. And it was in the same year he produced another modernist poem, Whispers of Immortality. And these are the modernist poems written by him before the poem The Wasteland. And The Wasteland seems to be the groundbreaking work, the masterpiece of T.S.Eliot. So it has been regarded as one of the greatest poems in English literature. And to say that I have not read Wasteland is a shame for everybody. Those people who have some pretensions of literature, those who claim that they know something in the line of English literature, are ashamed to say that they have not read The Wasteland. And such is the importance of the poem, The Wasteland. Before The Wasteland, Eliot came out with a few modernist poems, starting with the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and it was followed by Portrait of a Lady, and then the two other poems, Gerondine in 1920, and Whispers of Immortality. And these were the important poems produced by him before he produced the Wastelands. He had also produced a collection of essays called Sacred Wood. The collection included 20 critical essays, and it was also produced in 1920. And 2 years after the Sacred Wood, Whispers of Immortality, and Gerondine, and 5 years after the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and the portrait of the lady, he came out with his poem, The Wasteland. And it is said that the wasteland initiated the modern age. The modern age was inaugurated by the publication of The Wasteland in 1922. It was almost like the beginning of a new age. Like Wordsworth and Coleridge brought in a new age of romantic revival with the publication of lyrical ballads. Eliot opened a new age in literature called the modern age with the publication of his poem, The Wasteland. Say the importance between these two collections. So the groundbreaking poem, Wasteland, can be compared with the collection, Lyrical Ballads by Coleridge and Wordsworth, because both initiated a new age in literature. Lyrical Ballads inaugurated the Romantic Revival, and Wasteland inaugurated the modern age. So the early poems written by T.S.Eliot are also important, and there are always a few questions asked from this area also. Once UGC asked a question from Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and in the poem, which painter is discussed? Which classical painter is discussed in the poem The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock was one question asked by the UGC. In the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, we come to find a middle-aged gentleman who is in the lookout to declare his love. He has been wooing a lady for a long time, but has got no courage at all to declare his love. And as often, so he visits the lady and attends a party with the intention to declare his love, but he has got no courage at all, and is like a crab moving backwards. He has been described as a crab moving backwards in his decisions, and he has been equated with Hamlet in his procrastination, in his delay in executing his thoughts. He wanted to declare his love but had no courage at all to declare the love. And when he comes to the party, he finds the ladies, including his beloved, going out and going into the rooms and speaking of Michelangelo. The ladies come and go and speak of Michelangelo. And the question of UGC was which painter is referred to in the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It was Michelangelo. And it is in this poem we come to find the modernist trait written in the stream of consciousness style, the internal monologues of Prufrock. Interestingly, Prufrock is a portmanteau, prudishness and frock coat. Prudishness for a gentleman, the prudish behavior of a British person. And then he is found wearing the frock coat, and these two words are blended into Prufrock. Prudishness, the PRU has been taken, and from frock coat, the frock has been taken, and Prufrock. And the poem's title is actually a misnomer. The title is a confusing title. Actually, it's not at all a love song. And it is not to be called a song, and it doesn't actually deal with love. And the name of the person, Prafruk, has been given as a concrete name by blending two words. And actually, it is a misnomer. And he is on his way, Prafruk is on his way to propose to his lady, but no courage to declare his love. And his indecision is described in the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prafruk. And there are many interesting images introduced in the poem. In the beginning itself, a very powerful image has been introduced by T.S.Eliot, speaking about the evening that is spread out against the sky like a patient etherized on a table. The evening has been described as a patient etherized on, and he has been administered some drugs. Some anesthesia has been administered to him for an operation, and he has been put on the operating table. Evening has been described as etherized on a table. A patient etherized on a table. And the fog in the evening, there is a foggy atmosphere, and the fog in the evening is described as cat on the move. And Prafruk has been compared to Hamlet in his indecisive manner, in his procrastination, in executing his thoughts. And he has been also compared to the biblical Lazarus. And he is very poor in taking his decisions. So he takes decisions, but very poor in carrying the decisions out. And this was one poem produced by T.S.Eliot in 1917. And the poem was edited by Ezra Pound and published in the magazine Egoist. Egoist was a magazine started by Ezra Pound. Formerly it was New Free Woman, a female magazine. And Ezra Pound was appointed as the assistant editor there, and he turned the magazine into a literary magazine. And Richard Aldington and Hilda Doolittle were the assistant editors to the magazine. And after all, when Richard Aldington left the place, T.S.Eliot became the assistant editor, and he served as assistant editor to the magazine for a few years. And this poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prafruk, was brought out in the magazine The Egoist. And it was in the same year he produced another poem called Portrait of a Lady. And this poem interestingly imitates the title of Henry James. Henry James has got his masterpiece novel, The Portrait of a Lady. Henry James, as you know, was the one person who started the genre called literary realism. In literary realism, there will be center of consciousness. There will be a central character. And actually, the stream of consciousness is an extension of the center of consciousness. In Henry James's novels, we come to find that there will be always a center of consciousness. In his novel, The Portrait of the Lady, the center of consciousness or the central character is a young lady named Isabel Archer. And the title of this novel has been used by Eliot for his poem, Portrait of a Lady. And the epigraph of the poem is very interesting. It is taken from Marlowe's play, Christopher Marlowe's play, Jew of Malta. And the lines, "Thou hast had fornication, but that was in another country. And besides, the wench is dead." And this is the epigram given to the poem, The Portrait of a Lady. And the epigram has been taken from Christopher Marlowe's play Jew of Malta. And there we come to find Barabbas addressing the two corrupt friars. The friars are also corrupt. And he later kills these two friars. In one of their meetings, Barabbas refers to them, their evil ways in their olden days. The friars practiced the evil ways in their past life. And now they pose as great Christian missionaries. And they are found working against Barabbas. Therefore, Barabbas is found telling them that you people are also involved with fornication. You also did adultery, but it was in the other country, and the wench was also, the girl with whom you had done the fornication was also dead. But here the situation is different. T.S.Eliot adopted this epigram as an epigraph for his poem, The Portrait of a Lady. And the poem shows upper class society as something rather empty, and he presents upper class society something rather empty and forlorn. And the first line of the poem seemingly very interesting. Among the smoke and fog of a December afternoon. The poem begins with the line, among the smoke and fog. So we come to find the fog in his first poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, and there fog has been compared to a cat on the move. And Portrait of a Lady actually begins with the line, among the smoke and fog of a December afternoon. Actually, he presents the picture of a lady, a fashionable lady who is slightly senior and who was friendly with T.S.Eliot. And the other poem written by him in 1920, he also produced two poems in 1920. One was called Gerondine. And it was a question asked by UGC about Gerondine. Very recently, UGC asked the question, who wrote the poem Gerondine? Gerondine was a poem written by T.S.Eliot in 1920. And Gerondine actually speaks about the impressions and opinions of a gerondic person. Gerondic person means elderly person. And there are the term gerondic and gerondine and geriatric all used commonly. In the hospitals we come to find geriatric wards for the senior people. And gerondine is actually connected with elderly people. And it's presented as a dramatic monologue. And the poem also presents Europe as a wasteland after World War I. And the wasteland idea can be found in Gerondine also. And it was this reason why Eliot wanted Gerondine to be put as a preface to the wastelands. When he produced the wasteland, he wanted to put Gerondine as the preface to the wastelands. But it was Ezra Pound who discouraged the idea. So it was Ezra Pound who edited the poem The Wastelands. Eliot wrote the poem in about 1,000 lines. But Ezra Pound edited the poem. And so he cut short the poem into 434 lines. There are 434 lines in The Wastelands. Even when the poem has got only 434 lines, it has been regarded as the longest poem in literature by Ezra Pound. It was Ezra Pound who maintained the idea that The Wasteland is the longest poem in English literature. And actually the length is only 434 lines. But there is justification in the opinion made by Ezra Pound, because for a proper understanding of the poem, we need to spend long hours. Like reading a long poem, we will have to spend long time, in fact, to understand the poem. The time taken for understanding the poem is considered in the opinion made by Ezra Pound. Eliot actually wanted to put Gerondine as the preface to his poem, Wastelands. And this is one very important UGC point. In Gerondine also he presents the wasteland after the World War. World War I is over and the world has turned to become a spiritual desert. And the elderly man has been presented there and he is surprised to find the spiritual desert and written in the format of a dramatic monologue. And the idea of putting the poem as the preface was discouraged by Ezra Pound. And there is also an epigraph in the poem. There is also an epigram or an epigraph for this poem also. Normally, most of the poems written by T.S.Eliot carries some type of epigraph. And I told you the poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, was preceded by an epigraph taken from Dante's Inferno. So the epigraph for The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock was taken from Dante's Divine Comedy. And Divine Comedy has been written in 3 books. And the books are Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. And each book contains 33 cantos. Except the first book. The first book has got 34 cantos. And this was also one question asked by UGC. How many cantos are there in each book of the Divine Comedy? 33 each. In fact, there are 100 cantos, and in the first book there are 34 cantos, and in the other 2 books there are 33 each. And generally speaking, there are 33 cantos in each of the books. And in Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, we come to find the epigraph is taken from Dante's Divine Comedy. And it is taken from the book called Inferno, and the canto is 27, canto number 27. And it is in the canto we come to find Guido, a sinner, is in the Inferno, in the hell. And as Dante was found passing the way, and Dante was there passing the way along with Virgil, Guido found Dante, and Guido felt that Dante was also sent to the Inferno, and he also